Let's bring in CBS News Miami investigative reporter Jim DeFede. He is also the host of their Sunday morning public affairs program, Facing South Florida. Jim, obviously the Angie Nixon story is the biggest one statewide in Florida. Talk to me about how that race went down, how big a surprise it is, and how it complicates things for other Democrats on that same ballot come November.
No, absolutely. Look, I've been covering politics in Florida for going on 30 years, and I can't think of a more surprising election night result than Angie Nixon's win. But when you take a step back and try to analyze why it happened, I think there were several factors. One, Alex Vindman wasn't a very good candidate. He was relatively new to the state, only been in the state of Florida for 3 years. He was recruited by national Democrats as well as Florida state Democrats to run. And there it was a feel that he was sort of bigfooting his way into the race, raising a lot of money, having a big profile, but not having a lot of emphasis on the ground. He didn't run much of a campaign. He ended up finishing now with $7 million in the bank, even though he had raised 15. He only spent half of it, keeping the rest on tap for the November election, which he now won't be a part of. But I think the real story here is how Angie Nixon really ran a very energetic, let's put it that way, campaign. She tapped into the DSA energy. She declared herself to be the Democratic Socialist candidate, even though she had never really been a Democratic Socialist in the past. That was a relatively new moniker. In fact, the Democratic Socialists of America never endorsed her in that race. They didn't think she was going to win. They didn't think that she was truly a real DSA member. They thought she was grifting onto their momentum after Michigan and after New York and Colorado. And so they were reluctant to endorse her. So they didn't. They stayed out of the race. But here was the real key. Here was the bottom line. What you had was a situation where Alex Vindman's wife, Rachel Vindman, put out a tweet about 3 weeks ago, just at the start of early voting. 3 weeks ago, she tweeted out something fairly despicable about Angie Nixon, mocking and making fun of her clothing, saying that she was sort of a lowbrow candidate, calling her a bad person. Let me tell you something. In the Democratic primary, you insult an African-American woman, that's a real problem. And after that insult, once that happened, African-American elected officials who up until that point had stayed away from Angie Nixon because they thought she was too fringe, they jumped in to defend her, support her, endorse her, and start campaigning for her. And that's the pivotal moment in the campaign.
And the effects of this outcome on the statewide ballot for Democrats come November?
Look, it's one of the most schizophrenic tickets I've ever seen. So on the top of the very top of the ticket in the Senate race, you have a Democratic Socialist. Right under that race, you have the governor's race with David Jolly, a former Republican congressman turned independent, turned Democrat, who is trying to run as a moderate, who is trying to run saying that he can appeal to Republicans as well as independents who are tired on an economic message, who want a better life here in Florida and don't believe the Republicans who have ruled Tallahassee for the last 28 years can deliver it. So you now have Democrats trying to argue it's a Big Tent party when it really just looks incredibly schizophrenic. You have a Democratic Socialist and you have a former Republican member of Congress running and leading your standard bearers. And the result is that every Democrat up and down the ticket, I'm talking to a lot of them today, are terrified because now they're going to be asked the question, where do you stand on the DSA? Where do you stand on Angie Nixon? And just like in the way that Alex Vindman couldn't disrespect Angie Nixon and get away with it, Democrats like Jolly and others who were running for Congress have to distance themselves from her because they don't want to embrace the socialist label in Florida, but at the same time they can't disrespect her by dismissing her. So it makes their races that much more complicated.
Jim DeFede, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.